Well, Lee, welcome to the channel. I'm just going to jump right into this. Who are you for people that are unaware? And what brought you to carnivore?
So my name is Lee. I live in the Garden of England in Kent, which is why I call myself Kent Carnivore. And I originally went carnivore over 2.5 years ago now to try and get rid of my depression. I was suffering really, really badly with depression as a consequence of the outcome of my ileostomy surgery, which was 8 years ago. Would you like me to go back from the beginning? Because it's like way back in 2012 where this began.
Yeah, let's just get all the way into it. Yeah.
So back in 2012, that's when I presented with my first set of symptoms. That was an indication that I wasn't optimally healthy anymore. So I presented with diarrhea, and this was bloody diarrhea actually. So it kind of all happened out of nowhere. There was no kind of previous signs or symptoms. I believed I was eating like everybody else, everything in moderation, reasonably balanced and healthy as far as I was concerned. And one day I had to go to the toilet, felt like I had diarrhea, and there was a load of blood on the paper. And so that was a bit of a shock. I took myself down to my GP and we talked about the symptoms. And that's where they obviously wanted to find out, what do you have? What's going on here? So they referred me to the hospital and they basically used a probing device. It was a sigmoid endoscopy. So it's like a probing device with a camera and pincers that goes up the back end. And they blow up certain sections of the intestine to just have a look around with the camera, and then every now and again they would take biopsies, and that's how they came back actually with the diagnosis of ulcerative colitis a couple of weeks later. So I went down to see my doctor and we talked about it. As far as he was concerned, he said it was just unfortunate for me. It's in my genetics, and they have drugs when it gets to the point where I need drugs. And they talked about plant foods and fiber. They put a lot of emphasis on whole grains and also little and often, so small regular meals, lots of colours, lots of plants. And so that's what I did. I listened. I was quite concerned about my health, so I went home and I wasn't having to change my diet all that much, can you believe? I just basically tried to make it more whole food, more whole grain, so less like white bread and white rice and more brown bread, brown rice, this kind of stuff. My breakfast typically looked like porridge oats with goji berries and apples and cinnamon and all this kind of stuff. And I would do this sort of 5 times a day, just base my meals around grains. There would be some animal protein in there in the way of chicken and cod. Every now and again, I would have a burger. That would be where I would get most of my red meat from, but that would be every time I went out to a restaurant or something like that. And of course, I'm looking at it thinking, well, there's all my macros, there's a bunch of colours, this can't be too bad, all this kind of stuff. And so that's what I did. For 2 years, I was just eating 5 sort of roughly meals that consisted mostly of plant foods. My symptoms actually got worse. And so in 2014 now, I revisit my GP and we talk things through again. He said, you're doing the right things in terms of your diet, but we now have some drugs for you. So they prescribe some steroids. I can't remember the name of this steroid, but it's a very typical steroid treatment drug to address specifically colitis. So for anybody who doesn't know, ulcerative colitis affects exclusively the colon, where Crohn's disease, which is also an inflammatory bowel disease, can affect anywhere from gum to bum. So mine was restricted in the colon. And can you believe they never tested for gluten? They never really talked about like, what do you eat? Do you drink? What's your lifestyle like? None of that. It was just like plants, grains, little and often, and now here's some drugs. So that's what I went away with. I continued to do that, and I would say for the first year, my symptoms were reduced a little bit. I mean, steroids can be really quite miraculous if while you're on them, but they're just not sustainable. They're very, very sort of egregious and toxic and not sustainable long term. And so this is what I did all the way up until 2017, can you believe? And I would go in and out of flare ups. This is what we call flare ups. So you feel like a normal person until you hit this what we call a flare up, and then you present with all these nasty symptoms once again, the bloody diarrhea. In the beginning, it was maybe 5, 6, 7 times. Years go by and it was probably, encroaching on 10, 12, 13, 14. And I'd only really known 20 for a day or so here and there on a really bad flare, maybe around like 2015 and 16. But all of a sudden in 2017, I'm flaring for the last time and I'm almost immediately going 30 times a day. So just really brutal and relentless. I was back at my parents' house at the time and they were in the States, so they didn't really understand the predicament I was in. And I was laying on the couch or the sofa, or the sofa or the couch. I've got to remember. I'm talking to everybody here, so same thing. I was laying on the settee. How about that one? And I would get comfortable, and get signs to go to the toilet, and we had a toilet upstairs, and so went upstairs, go to the toilet, and you deal with that. You come back down, and by the time I got comfortable again, I was pretty much getting the urge to go straight back up, and this was like all the way through the day. It felt like I had no rest at all, and I did this for almost 2 days. And before the second day was up, I got on the phone to my nan because I also wasn't driving at the time, so it was just terrible timing. And I said, I don't think I've got another day left in me. I genuinely don't think I can do another day like this. And so she basically picked me up the next morning. We went straight to the hospital. It was a horrible car journey there because I'm considering the frequency at which I'm going to the toilet, and all of a sudden now I'm having to try and hold it for like a 30-minute car journey. It was horrible. Presented like a real mess at the hospital at the A&E. I definitely like atrophied. My muscles were look smaller. I was very dehydrated. Iron levels were low. So they hooked me up with the intravenous drip, gave me some different steroids to lower inflammation so they could do an investigatory, try and figure out, what's happening to Lee, what's going on. And so they did a similar thing, another sigmoid endoscopy. This time they continued to go further and further up, and they could just see that my whole entire colon was just riddled with colitis. The previous time they were sort of making light of it, trying to keep my spirits up, we're going to go around the corner here and you're going to feel this and all this kind of stuff. This time was totally different. They were really serious, eyes on the monitor. I didn't take the anaesthetic either time, so I could kind of read the room. I had these women holding my hands like I was giving birth because it's quite uncomfortable as they go around, and up. And they said, like, you're in real trouble here, we have one last shot at this. It's an immune suppressant drug. It's very potent. It's a trial drug. We can only put you on it for a number of days. And actually, I can't remember the amount of days I was on it, but I remember I was on it for 2 days longer than they suggested. And that's when the main doctor, the main guy, came round with a bunch of women, like 5 or 6 women came in, and they all put their hands on my legs, and they were sort of, trying to break this news to me. And I was like, what's going on? It's fine, And the doctor was like, yeah, we're going to have to see you first thing in the morning and take your entire colon out. So that was a bit of a shock. But at the same time, can you believe I was almost welcoming it? Because up until that point, I felt like I'd been poisoned. My body's trying to rid this threat, and it's not taking. And so please just, save me. I'm in trouble, kind of thing. And so in some ways, I was welcoming it. And so the next thing is they had some stoma nurses come round and talk about basically my future. This is a stoma. This is what it's going to look like. Here are some bags. This is how, we're going to cut a hole here and put it over the stoma, and this is how it works. They gave me a little pamphlet to talk about some details, certain foods to avoid. Can you believe they were all plants, basically, apart from dairy? And when they start to refeed you, so now I've had this surgery, right? I have the surgery. They give me my stockings and my gown. They put me out, and I just don't remember anything other than waking back up again and feeling just very, very groggy and out of it. The pain comes on quite quickly. They ask you what your pain level is. It's like, 4, 5, 6, 7. It goes up quite fast. And then, I was in the ICU for about 2.5 days. But on sort of day 3 or 4, that's when they fed me for the first time. And they don't give you any fibre, which I find really interesting. They give you, white bread, butter. They gave me Pringles. That's a really popular thing to give people, is Pringles, because it's like the starch and the salt, and let's try and stodge the output up as well, and all this kind of stuff. It's like a superfood when you've got stoma, apparently, Pringles and white bread. But interestingly, they don't give you any fibre because that could cause blockages. So completely the contrary advice to what I was given when I had the problem and all this kind of stuff. And they didn't check for gluten, but all of that stuff now is a bad idea. And anyway, I kind of just gained my independence, I guess, with the bag. So I'm able to stand and walk. Now I'm able to wash, reach around my back after you've got this sort of adhesion now in your stomach, and also change the bag. They want to see that you can, change the bag and all this kind of stuff and clean the stoma. And once they were happy, they sent me home, and I was quite happy to go home because now I felt like I was finally going to get some sleep. Fell back into my flat bed, which was really quite a shock because I was used to lowering myself down, and now this, it's very tender now on my abdominal wall, and so it's quite difficult to climb into the bed, so you kind of have to like roll into bed. But the very next day, everybody went to work. So my mum and dad, my brother was still living there. They all went to work, and all of a sudden it's just like dead quiet, and it's just me waking up like about 11 a.m. or something, and there's no one in the house. It's just me and my thoughts and these racy thoughts and this little voice in my head. And all of a sudden, it's like immediately I just didn't like my life, like where do I go from here? I'm useless. Like, look at me. I didn't like the way it looked or felt. It started to really affect my sleep because I just felt restricted to my back all the time. If I laid on my right, the output would move quicker, and so then I'd have to get up in the middle of the night. If I lay to my left, it would feel, because the bag is on my right, if I lay to my left and there's anything in it, it pulls. And so I just felt restricted to laying on my back. And so the combination of my outlook and dealing with this thing and trying to put a future together in my head, and then lack of sleep and the diet I was on, it was just like horrible, vicious, like combination of things. It's just toxic soup, and I just couldn't get out of it. I couldn't figure out why I felt this. I just immediately thought, I'm going to be alone for the rest of my life. I don't really accept this. No one else is going to accept it. Anyway, slowly got back to work, and work, that wasn't as easy. It wasn't as, like, I don't know, not that it was massively enjoyable before, but now I'm starting to hate my job. Sleep. I developed a hate relationship with food, because now food is even more of a nightmare, can you believe, with the bag, all the time I was eating all these plant materials, than without it. Because now I'm having more obstructions, and my abdominal wall would actually react and flex and contract when food was ready to come out and empty into the bag, because it's now going through my abdominal wall. Because all this fiber doesn't break down, it's like, it just caused a nightmare. And slowly but surely, I was almost backing off of certain foods and feeling guilty about it, because I still believe that that's where all of the vitamins and minerals were in. And anyway, this continued for a number of years, until I was kind of like, I don't even know what I can say, or not on this platform now, but I was definitely suicidally depressed. You know, it was just getting worse and worse and worse, to the point where I knew I needed help. Like, me on my own and my thoughts and just trying to be positive is not working. Me trying to put on fake smiles and fool the world, and you know, to not kind of like upset my family, because I've just got to put on a brave face, that wasn't working. When I got home and there was no one in the house, I would just freeze, because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And there were times where I was in the bathroom cutting out my bag with the scissors, and I'm not going to say what I was thinking at the time, but yeah, there was a few times where I dropped the scissors and thought, I can't do this anymore. This is getting ridiculous. Scary thoughts that became very, very real. And it's one thing actually to think about these things, and then there's another thing when you're about to do it. It becomes very real, and I don't think I was quite, because in my opinion, I think when somebody actually ends their life, they self terminate. I don't think that person's alive anymore. I think they're already dead. And I think that I was encroaching on this fringe. I was on the fringe, but I hadn't quite passed this line yet, this threshold. And so anyway, I was kind of still there enough to realise I need help. And I reached out to my GP once again. We had a conversation. Obviously, he realised I was very severely depressed, and he gave me another contact number, and you book this appointment. They ring you, and then you have a very extensive, in-depth conversation about everything, actually, crazy things that they were talking about. And that day, actually, I got off the phone, I quit drinking. This was 2 months before I went carnivore, by the way. And I was waiting a number of days expecting this call, and it never came. Weeks, starting to get a bit worried. 2 months go by. I've already realised I'm on my own, and for whatever reason, I didn't get the ball rolling again. You couldn't call this number back, because it was like a one-sided situation for whatever reason. And I was just kind of like, right, okay, I'll wait for something. I don't know. I was sitting on the sofa, or the settee once again, and I was watching YouTube, and Michaela Peterson's anecdote popped up on the low carb down under channel, Don't Eat This. And so I just watched it by chance. I knew about Jordan Peterson just a little bit. I didn't realise who she was. And all of a sudden she's talking about having autoimmunity and severe depression. And so she's like speaking to me, this is me. That's what I've been suffering with. And I'm in a rut, and I'm desperate. And she talks about being on a lion diet, a very strict carnivore diet, and being sort of relieved of all of these symptoms. And I was pretty much sold on the spot. I was amazed, really blown away. And I just knew, not that I believed it was a sign, I just thought this is an opportunity that I would be a fool not to take. And so I communicated to my partner to my right, and her being just very supportive, we both jumped in together into a BBBE challenge, so beef, butter, bacon and eggs. And that was it. It was a 30-day challenge, let's see how this goes. Overnight, my acid reflux went, and I was suffering with that daily. And it's not something that was really pressing, because I was just so depressed, but that went immediately. I did have some skin issues, acne, and I had worse acne on my back. That almost completely cleared up in a week. My energy started to come back after 2 weeks, because I was struggling a little bit for not having carbohydrates, and switching overnight was a mistake, but I just didn't really know any better. And I was so desperate. I was quite impatient once I had this idea in my head. I'm like, I'm doing it now. I want to do it right now, So that's what I did. And anyway, the energy started to come back a little bit more and more. And then by the time I hit day 21, I woke up, I didn't feel hungry for breakfast. I went to work. It was a beautiful day. and I'm cleaning windows. And for the first time in God knows how long, I realised I was actually happy. Like I was smiling, looking around and appreciating just everything, details in nature and trees and leaves and birds and the sky and even people. Like I hadn't enjoyed people for a very long time. Almost became a misanthrope actually, because I kind of took everything so personally and victimized myself and my situation. And for the first time, I enjoyed communicating with people. I realized I'm actually happy, and I couldn't help it. I pulled over in my van, recorded the first video, like my testimony. My depression is gone. Like I feel great. My energy's off the charts. I'm not, but I even said in that video, I'm not burning in the sun, and it was summertime. I know it's not crazy over here in the UK, but I would burn. I'm very pale. I wasn't sweating, and I'd already learned a few things like this basic knowledge of foundation of knowledge that a lot of us carnivores kind of gain just on the journey, learning about how unnecessary all these things are that we thought were so crucial. And I just couldn't believe it. And it was a 30-day challenge. It's been over 2.5 years now. I've not had a single symptom of depression, acid reflux. I've not burnt. I don't sweat. It's great. Everything's great. Life is good.
Awesome. Wow. Yeah. So I was actually going to ask you this in the beginning, and then you touched on it at the very end of that when you talk about your depression. Because at the beginning you said, well, Carnivore had fixed my chronic and severe depression as a result of your condition, your gastrointestinal condition. However, one may be led to believe when you say that the depression was solely due to that condition. However, it sounds like that may have been the catalyst for it, but the fact that the diet fixed the depression before it really started to, ostensibly before it had a very significant effect on your GI issue, shows me that they were actually, at the end of the day, two separate things. They were two separate issues. Your threshold by which you would have to, have certain stimuli attain your severe depression episodes or depressive episodes was increased far greater when you started to get on Carnivore, is what it seems. So that's why I was going to ask was, did you have depression from anything else, do you think? Do you think it really was only from the GI issue and then it just spiraled into something else? Or do you think that it came from other things as well that you just kind of didn't realize you had until you got on the diet?
So I've always been a naturally neurotic child. Like I remember being very nostalgic. Like I almost enjoy. I think maybe that is what nostalgia is. Almost getting a kick out of sadness pertaining to previous moments in your life. It's kind of strange. But I was quite nostalgic, quite neurotic, very introspective. I overanalyzed everything, myself, my speech, everybody else's speech. I'm trying to get to what they think of me. When I said that, what did they think? Because this is what I thought when that person said this and that. It just overanalyzing everything, way, way deep, racy thoughts all the time. And so I had known bouts of definitely anxiety. I was socially more awkward. I was kind of a glass half empty kind of guy. But I also would say that I was just realistic. So I would always say, no, I'm not pessimistic. I'm just realistic. But I definitely think that I was quite negative. I had a gloomy outlook on life and I put myself down a fair bit. And so I had known this type of feeling. And like what you said, this was the pulling the trigger on it. Like to have this happen to me, it just was not compatible with my personality. And all of a sudden it was like, it took me over the edge. It was, this glass was filling up and it had to reach a level. And it's like, yeah, this is as much as you can take. You're going to break at this point. And this took me over that point. And it's like what you said, it's not like going carnivore eradicated the outcome of my surgery. That hasn't changed. The diet changed. And so I've lived a life being depressed with this bag. And then I changed my diet. I still have my bag. Now I'm no longer depressed. So exactly, you're right. You're right to say that. I mean, I always say like it's as a consequence of my surgery, which I believe in many ways it is, but you're right. This can fit. The diet fixed my depression. It didn't fix the outcome of my surgery. I still have that, but I have a different outlook on life now. So yeah, I had known some of these episodes before, just nothing like this. It had never been quite so real in terms of life or death, in the way I thought about things in my life. It was very deep and dark, and it became a little too real there towards the end, and I'd never experienced anything quite like that.
Yeah. You said that before you ever had to actually have your colon removed, you were starting to eat differently that you in a way that you thought was healthier according to your general practitioner's advice, and also the entire medical field's advice. You said you started to eat more what we consider or what others consider at least whole foods. Um, do you think that that expedited the rate at which you had to have your colon removed? Because the thing is whole grains is what you emphasized on when you talked about whole foods, and those are almost exclusively insoluble fiber, which arguably is the worst kind of fiber that you can have because your body can't do anything with it. It can't ferment it. It just goes directly through you, or actually it gets stuck in you. So do you think that actually expedited the process at all?
Yes, I think if I presented that day and we've got the results back and the advice was almost the contrary. I think if he said stay away from whole grains, stay away from whole plant foods, eat animal products, maybe stay away from dairy actually, but if you focus on red meat, maybe some duck eggs and some duck, you can have duck, high quality pork, eggs. If they said if you are going to eat carbohydrates, eat some white rice, eat some gluten-free white bread, you know, that, even if they said juice your cabbages and things, I'm not saying that's a healthy way to go, but I think that I would have at least kept on to my colon, maybe even avoided surgery forever. Even I may have developed some other issues, but I very, very strongly believe that it was the advice that I took, and I was under the impression that, I need to listen to these guys. These are older, wiser, and smarter. I'm putting my health in your hands. And I was concerned and naive at the time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the more desperate you are, the more inclined you're going to be to listen to those people anyway. I went through the exact same thing. At that point, even though I knew that you should have a healthy distrust of authority or of authority figures, it's like, yeah, it's easy to say that when you can rely on yourself to fix everything, you know. But when you can't, you're far more inclined to do it very with more alacrity than otherwise. You said you were also on steroids too. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, this is something that I don't often talk about on my channel, but a lot of people don't realize that steroids, they are anti-inflammatory. But the myth is that all inflammation is a bad thing. I mean, your body becomes inflamed for a reason. You don't want to shut down that inflammation without understanding why the inflammation is there. There's a lot of people that take corticosteroids or cortisone shots for joint inflammation, and what they do is it'll reduce the inflammation in the area, and it'll seem to have healed the injured area. But over time, you use, let's say it's in your elbow, you start using your elbow more as a result of those shots. After the shot wears off, it hurts a lot more than before you put the shot in because you've injured yourself more. The pain is there the swelling is there to stop you from harming it more. So, yeah, steroids can make things worse after you've taken them. Did you have anything like that as well, or did you not really notice that?
Yeah, I would say I didn't notice because, in my opinion, it just felt like this progression, this trend that I was on, and I couldn't deviate. So, I felt like some relief at first with the steroids at first. After a year of taking them, it was like I went back before taking the steroids, but I'm taking the steroids, it feels like I'm not taking them anymore. So yeah, so it almost felt like similar to a year before I took them, but now I'm on them. And they didn't want to up this too much. As a few years went by, I just naturally felt more inflamed, but I just thought this is the disease getting worse and I'm doing everything I can, but it's not working. That's just how I felt. So it's kind of a strange situation, really. Very little understanding of it.
Okay. Yeah, so let's start focusing more on the fiber issue because that's kind of what you're known for in the space. Your story focuses around fiber, and it's something completely. The idea that fiber can actually be doing the exact opposite of what people say it's doing. It's supposed to make your bowel motions more regular. When in reality, you're very familiar, I believe, with the 2012 study that I incessantly cite on my channel that showed. This is the only real study that tried to show fiber's efficacy in ameliorating things like constipation, and the result of it shows that it suggests, at least, that it's probably the opposite in terms of what fiber does, which makes sense because, if you really think about it, it's not digestible. No fiber really is. And it's not the idea that since it's not digestible, it just goes right through you is sort of silly. I mean, if your body's not designed to be able to digest it, how is it able to very efficiently move through you? So, I wanted to ask you something that you've actually talked about before, but since you're on my channel, I want to ask you this again. Has there ever actually been an instance of meat or any animal products getting stuck in your colostomy bag? And if not, I can see you shaking your head. Have there been any instances of things like fiber and plant material getting stuck in your colostomy bag?
Yes, so with the meat thing, this was brand new to me. This whole journey was quite a strange thing of discovery. So typically over here in the UK on a Sunday we have a Sunday roast, and that would consist of some meat, some potatoes and vegetables and gravy, that kind of stuff. Now, after I'd had my surgery, now I'm wearing the bag. I'm going back round to my parents' house, like traditional, basically to meet with the family and have a Sunday roast. And in the bag, so this is where it would hit my colon. What I'm seeing in the bag is where it would hit the beginning of my colon. I'm now seeing all of these plant materials, the colours, the shapes, everything. But I've never noticed any meat, and so I would have eaten some lamb or some chicken, the gravy, the potatoes, some broccoli, some peas and carrots, say. Now in the bag is bright orange chunks and whole peas. You think you're chewing all of it? Honestly, people think like when you bite into a sandwich, it's got all seeds in it. You're just going to mash every single one of those seeds. No, some of those go down whole, and there are whole seeds in the bag. Right? There's the broccoli florets from the roast. There's the orange carrots and cabbage and large chunks of material that I've chewed all the same. Bearing in mind, I'm putting all of this stuff into my mouth and chewing it exactly the same. Now, the chicken, the beef, the lamb, whatever it is that I've had, you wouldn't be able to recognize that. So if I was to show you this bag, it would look like a watery substance with just bits of plant material floating around it that you could identify. You could not identify which animal product I've eaten that day. So yeah, that's how I would explain that. But interestingly, I have had a few obstructions, and this is before it enters into the bag, and it's around this corner that can be quite problematic. And so I've had a problem with brown rice. That was really bad. And I've had a problem with mushrooms. And I've had sort of mild problems with, because, mushrooms are different. They're chitin rather than cellulose, for example. Um, I would say they're even worse. Yeah, even worse. It's like even more gas promoting. And maybe we'll get into this. I don't know. I've just spoke to Anthony Chafee about this. It's kind of like I don't know, a mystery. But I don't have a colon, so apparently I don't have much of my biome down there. Obviously, I don't have a colon. How do I ferment this stuff? How do I create so much gas in the bag when I don't have a colon? So it's quite interesting. So even before this stuff hits my bag, I've created a lot of gas, but I don't do the same thing when I eat animal products. So if I eat steak, which I've just done, that's going to be broken down into liquid, no problem. It's not going to get stuck anywhere. If it's liquid as it enters my bag, how could it get stuck in the colon for 10 years, So that's just nonsense. But the plant materials, like you'll see that in the bag, but it's also fermented somewhat in my small intestine somewhere because it's created all this gas. I've had like an Indian takeaway before with the bag before I went carnivore with mushrooms and onions, and I would wake up in the middle of the night with my bag blown up like a balloon. I can't even really even open it because there's so much air in there. So I have to like spray this anti-adhesive spray on the top to open enough of a window just to let some air out and to then actually be able to empty this thing. So that was the experiences that I've had with plant materials. The mushrooms, the fiber, it's still fermented. And if it's going to go in your colon, of course, that's where does the most of the fermentation process kind of thing. And you're emitting all this gas and stuff like that, which also can contribute to more constipation, methane and things like that. But yeah, it's a breeze when I don't eat any plant materials. If I only eat animal products, I'm not even aware that things are going in the bag. And there's hardly any air in there. If there's any air in there, I think I'm just taking it down when I'm eating. But if I was to switch that out with, say, mushrooms, onions, pineapple, cabbage, broccoli, it's an absolute nightmare to process. My abdominal wall tells me, oh, food's coming, because it's like it's contracting and flexing and all this kind of stuff. And then sometimes I'm even having to push my abdominal wall to help aid this stuff out. Yeah, it's an absolute nightmare. So people with a stoma bag, the best way to go is, well, the best way to go for every human being under any circumstance, it seems, and that's just to eat red meat, maybe some wild fish, maybe some eggs if you can tolerate, maybe some dairy, but depends on you as an individual.
Right. What about carbohydrates that don't have any fiber in them? Do you have problems with that in terms of digestion?
White rice would be the next best thing. White rice is the next best thing. After that, I would say white gluten-free bread is about the same as like potato starch. Maybe potato starch is worse, especially if you've got like fries and they're covered in salt. That's actually really quite problematic. Not that it's because it's more pliable, it doesn't create so much gas, but man, does it slow down your digestion. You feel like you're pushing out 10 times the volume that you put in. It's amazing. It really is. It's a mystery. I remember eating, so on the roast dinners, I would even cut back on the potato for that reason. So I used to have like, say, five, and now I'm having one. And you like try and think about the size of that one potato, and you look at what's in the bag, it's like, that's got to be six times that. It doesn't even make sense. And so I hated my food more and more, and I kind of naturally backed off of this stuff, but wasn't carnivore because I would still have fruit juices and I would still have pasta, rice, um, certain processed foods that would break down, even stuff in the microwave. That stuff actually isn't terrible because the fiber's not there. It turns to mush. You freeze fiber, it's like it just turns to mush, and it's weird. I don't know. I was still eating a lot of everything, and it wasn't until I cut out all of the plants that I actually had some real relief and my brain switched on, my eyes were open. I could just be a proper human and get on with my life and not feel like I got this rucksack of stress, this weight of the world just pushing down on me every day.
Yeah. Interesting. Are there any were there any of those plant foods that didn't really have that much fiber in them to speak of that still did cause you problems with digestion, or not really? They may have. I know that they probably did cause you problems with, like you said, I mean, your brain wasn't functioning as well as it could be, and all these the classic symptoms. But anything with regard to digestion, since that's on the topic.
I wouldn't say so much. If the fiber's taken out and it's refined, it wouldn't be as bad. I think I just started to get a bit fed up with the potato starch. Anytime I ordered some kind of takeaway, there would always be fries, and I would try and limit it, but that would actually just cause problems. You got a few minutes of somewhat joy, and then it's just totally gone in the past, and now you're just struggling for hours. So it just wasn't worth it. But I would say if it wasn't fibrous or a whole food, like fruit juice, for example, really a problem, unless I maybe put some other herbs and spices, made this massive concoction, which may have been a different story. But
Oh, that's a good question. Do spices give you a problem? Do you know about that?
I don't know because I've never isolated these things.
Okay.
They've always been in a coat. But
In
honestly, the worst thing in the world for me was either a Chinese or an Indian takeaway. And if you think about it, they're all cooked in seed oils. It's got lots of different plant materials in there, intact, very greasy, very sugary, and it just is this horrible concoction that I think is very taxing on the whole digestive experience.
Oh yeah, I'm sure about that. So, moving away from that a little bit, how much given your condition, how much physical activity do you gauge in? Are you able to ever do any at all again? Or
Well, I mean, I clean windows, so that's a pretty physical job. My jump rope, I quite enjoy that just for fun, whether it's healthy or not. I think there are some benefits, but I like to skip and jump rope. I've done some sprinting. I mean, after my second surgery, I don't know if you want to get into that, but obviously that was to finalise. This was a permanent situation, so they removed the back end. They cut me actually open even further in my abdominal wall, and it was like a 12-week recovery. But at 5 weeks and 4 days, I was sprinting on this diet. Um, I mean, not going to get into any details, but I make love, like um, I could get into a swimming pool. I mean, I shower with this thing. It's fully waterproof. I just don't want to offend people. I wouldn't want to just take my top off like on the street. I think there's a time and a place, but I mean, I can run. I went to where Lucy works. She works at a climbing center where you've got these weight assisted walls on a bungee and all this kind of stuff. I can climb, and I mean, I box like by myself, shadow box and hip things and dummies and all this kind of stuff. I can do one-legged squats. I can do handstands. Yeah, so I mean, the only thing I wouldn't want to do is get into a cage where someone's going to smash my abdominal wall, something like that. That's one thing I probably wouldn't want to do. And when dogs jump up at me when I'm cleaning windows, I get a little bit paranoid because they're claws. So I'm like, oh, oh, he's a cute, isn't he? Yeah, like, get away from me.
yeah. Well, that does lead into another question then. If you're able to do all that stuff, what are the biggest issues with doing a carnivore diet with your condition, or are there any at all?
Yeah, there is. I would say there is one, but it's not. It's no better than the contrary. So our food breaks down to a liquid. All animal products break down to a liquid, and obviously I don't have that colon where it's going to reabsorb the water. So all the time my output is quite liquidy. But it's not like I'm having to sit on the toilet and have diarrhea, for example. I just need to empty a bag, which is quite liquidy. It would be nice if it wasn't quite as liquidy, but there are things that you can do. I think it's quite important for ostomates to salt their food, and obviously your taste buds are probably going to let you know how much that is. there is another hack, and I don't know whether this is super healthy or not. But if you do get fed up and say you did this once in a while because you've got to go to a funeral that day and you don't want to worry about emptying your bag too much, if you get like a grass-fed gelatin powder and add that to your meals, that helps stodge it up a little bit.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's one way to just get by that. Once in a blue moon or on someone's birthday or something, I would just fast, to be honest with you. That's a great way to go about it as well, fast, but just some gelatin and salt to taste is the way to go to fix that. But there aren't really any downsides to honestly just feeling really good and enjoying your food, you know?
Yeah. What does your output look like when you do fast?
This is interesting because I just done a 4 day dry fast. So what happens is, first of all, I'm quite empty quite fast. So if I had my colon and I just stopped eating food, I'd probably wake up the next day and still have food in me for like another 2 days, and I would be reabsorbing water and salt from that food, and I think that that helps. I go way deep in ketosis like overnight. I'm empty, blood sugar's way down, ketones way up. That happens almost overnight. Then I kind of flush myself out once, and then I'm kind of done for quite some time. Nothing really happens for about a day. And then all of a sudden, you just get this really gloopy looking bile stuff that the body secretes naturally, and it just never stops. It actually smells like vinegar. It's interesting. And it will stain anything. It almost stains the toilet. So yeah, it's like it looks darkish brown, like a banana when it's rotten, or like when it's turning. But then when it hits the toilet, it's like bright yellow, like a banana when it's not going on.
Wow. I wonder if
Yeah,
that has. I wonder if that's bilirubin, because bilirubin is the compound that your liver. It's in your bile, and I believe that's the compound that makes fecal matter its color. So I wonder if it's just that in isolation,
I think you
and
might
it's
be right. I said it looks just like bile, kind of. It almost has that. It's got the look and smell of bile. It's quite interesting. But I tell you what, I only have to empty like a quarter of a bag of that a day afterwards, every day, and so I can get much better sleep. It's something even in my mind. It's just so I can relax. I can take a break even from the carnivore diet, which sounds crazy, but every now and again, for someone who has to empty and change, it's quite nice just to not have to deal with it at all. It's kind of like just a holiday. I don't know, where you go and be a normal person. It feels like for a few days, and then you get back to your normal life again. So
okay. What would you say to someone who says that even if fiber isn't required for humans, because we know that it's not, as much as people consider it to be essential, the definition of essential is not what people think that it should be, because essential should mean it's required for human life, right? But their definition of essential is a nutrient that the body can't synthesize on its own, irrespective of whether it actually is required for human life. They say that it's essential. It's so
yeah,
so even what would you say to someone who says that even if it isn't required for humans, and there are inferences that may indicate that we stopped eating fiber for lots of our existence, that there are benefits to consuming it that you aren't considering when you eliminate it and may therefore be missing out on?
yeah. So I think that that's a classic. I think most people, most nutritionists and dietitians don't know this. Most doctors don't know this because they just don't. They're not well versed. They haven't looked into it. But when you stop eating fiber, of course, there are going to be changes in your digestive system. I would suggest doing it slowly, like transitioning into a carnivore diet, for example. Do it all slowly. Now, the idea around fiber and the benefit is that it feeds the gut. It's not food for us, it's food for the gut. So it hits the colon, and of course, we go through this process of fermenting the cellulose. And in the process of doing this, via the microorganisms that live there and reside there in the colon, we generate short chain fatty acids. That's what happens, and then that can be converted into ketones. And so there may be an argument around the importance of short chain fatty acids, which are saturated fats, and then the ketones, which feed the gut. But the people don't, they seem to bypass that. And of course, if we look at say valerate, propionate, butyrate, we have isobutyrate, isovalerate, isopropionate in animal proteins anyway, if short chain fatty acids are so important, which will feed the gut. But also, these are converted into ketones. And so we have these ketone bodies like beta hydroxybutyrate coursing around our veins, around our blood. And not only is that going to nourish all of the colonocytes that line the colon, because it's not just relying on the fiber that comes into contact with certain parts, certain colonocytes, but all of them are going to benefit. And then there's obviously a cascade of other benefits of having beta hydroxybutyrate, acetoacetate around the blood, the brain, the heart, mitochondria, all sorts. And so if we're talking about the colon specifically, we are actually doing a more thorough, better job of nourishing the gut without blocking nutrients, without gas, without constipation, without inflammation, and all of this stuff associated with fiber.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another point that I raise oftentimes because that is the most common argument given for fiber is that it feeds your gut bacteria. However, the myth there's a problem in that sentence when they say your, as if they know what gut bacteria I harbor. It's not the same all across the board. It depends on what gut bacteria you have. We know that the gut microbiome adapts to the diet that you are on over I would say long periods of time, but in reality, it's quite short. It's quite quick. As long as you transition appropriately and prudently is usually the word that I use there. And they also often talk about how there's prebiotic fibers. You've got fiber that functions as a prebiotic because it's food for the probiotics. But anything could be a prebiotic in reality. It doesn't have to be fiber. It can be anything that feeds your gut bacteria. And it's exactly what you were just talking about. There are things in meat that function as prebiotics. They have now basically propagandized us into believing that prebiotics only involve fiber. It's only like things like psyllium husk or something. That's not that's no, because meat can be a prebiotic. It is a prebiotic for people like me and people like you that are on a carnivore diet. So anyway, that's often what I try and say on my channel as well, but along with the fact that you can't actually establish proven benefits of basically any compound. It's up for speculation in the first place. So, anyway, I thank you for sharing your story again. I know that I'm asked to share my story quite often, and I know that whenever I'm asked, I always say, I'm like, okay, buckle up because it's going to be a long one. So I hope that it wasn't that much of you know, a big deal to share it. Because I know that
I
you're
end
there.
up sharing it from different angles, and I try and sort of speak differently about it and try and remember different experiences. Keeping it fresh and keeping different things on different channels. But it's just in the spur of the moment. What do I recall? Who am I speaking to? There's different ways to tell it, I suppose, but no, it's important, I think, just to be open and honest as well. There's obviously some touchy subjects in there. I'm never actually quite confident about whether that comes under policy or not, what words we can or can't use because it changes so often. But, there you go. That's what we edit for, I guess.
Yeah. So you have talked about how I believe that you're not really on any other social media besides YouTube, right?
Yeah, I'm only on YouTube. I have to do something about that, I think. I think I should get. Actually, I did set up a Rumble account, but I think I've got two videos on there and I should probably get more busy on there. But I think to open an Instagram, a Twitter, or X, Facebook, and all that kind of stuff is probably going to be beneficial to try and, just filter this message in from different angles and that
Yeah.
kind of thing, reach different people.
I'm bad at that too. I have those accounts, but I don't actually use them as much as I probably should. And maybe not in the exact in the best way or in the best ways. I use X for I sort of still treat it as a personal account. So there's some things that I think I might lose fans on if if they saw my replies to people. But since you are only really on YouTube, even if you're about to change that, what type of content do you actually upload on YouTube? Because it's a lot different from my content from what I've seen. It's starting to get a little similar, but most of your channel has been different types of content. So
It is quite varied, actually. I
yeah,
started thinking, I'm an IBD guy and a depression guy, so let's just talk about IBD and depression, my story, my updates. And then all of a sudden, as I was learning more and I realized that people were asking me questions, I thought, well, maybe I could sort of piece together like almost compilations to make a mini documentary style edit, if you like. So I then started to make a series, if we're not carnivores, explain this. And so I would touch on different avenues of carnivore, maybe some history, maybe some microbiology, maybe some human physiology, all this kind of stuff, nutrient density perspectives, and all this kind of stuff. Then I started to address the opposite side of things. So you've got obviously the vegans and all this kind of stuff. And I think a lot of people actually misinterpret that as just vegan bashing. I'm not bashing vegans. I have nothing against someone who wants to adopt a certain diet, but I do take somewhat an issue with activists and influencers that spread a dangerous narrative. I think there's a big difference between the two. So if a person wants to do whatever they want with their life, you're an adult, you can do that, that's fine. But I think it's different when you start to push something as a healthy application when it's quite the contrary. I think that that's dangerous. I think it's harmful. And so I try and combat that. So I do some sort of reactive videos, like reaction videos and stuff like that. But I try to keep it all common sense based, and I try to keep it entertaining. So I don't take myself or my life or everything so seriously all the time. But I do think that this is a serious matter. I just think I go about it to try and keep things entertaining. So my content's quite varied, and I think there's plenty in there that will probably entertain lots of different people. But you might find you like sort of one or two styles of my videos, and not all of them. That's up for you to decide. But yeah, I keep chop and changing my style a little bit. I've got a bit of a humour, I guess, so I like to make funny, entertaining videos. But then I also like to make mini documentaries where I really try to make compelling arguments as to why this is the most appropriate way to live and eat as a human being.
Awesome. Yeah, well, I will link that in the description of this video, as well as your other social media if at the time of the upload you start to utilize those. Even if you don't, I mean, people can follow you if they want to. But thanks again for sharing your story. I think that it actually is important because yours, I don't think any other story is as good as yours when it comes to showing the deleterious nature of fiber. And I know that might be a little reductionist, like that's your takeaway from the whole story. It's like, but in terms of people's application of that knowledge that they can derive from that, in terms of being able to implement some of it into their own lives, I think that's the most relevant to a lot of people. They don't realize how much damage fiber can be doing to them until, well, maybe they lose their colon. Hopefully not, God forbid. But, if it happened to you and a lot of other people have issues with fiber, it makes things like bloating seem a lot less innocent, you know? So anyway, yeah, thanks again. And we'll keep in touch as we already do. So, yeah.
Cheers, Eddie. Appreciate it.
Yeah.